Hello, physiological psychology students at Mary Baldwin College. Dr. Tausman coming to you live once again from my household here in Roanoke, Virginia. This first particular part of Module 2, we're going to talk about movement. And if you look at the picture, that's actually a picture of me on the handout. You can see that I'm actually holding a few different things. I'm standing with one foot in the air. And the reason I'm doing that, besides just being pretty silly about things, is to illustrate this idea that we all have an amazing motoric gifts. Even right now, I'm talking to you, that's motoric functioning for speech production. I'm walking, I'm waving my hands, I'm gesturing, I'm doing all these various motoric functions, many of them simultaneously. So in the human species, our ability to have strong motoric function and do many motoric functions simultaneously is almost like it's just automatic processing for us. If you've ever looked at this amazing, it's called behavioral plasticity. Have you ever watched a baby as it learns how to walk? Have you ever seen a speed skater trying to do speed skating things and seeing how that functions? Have you ever seen the bad signs of people who have things like Parkinson's disease, where the motoric function is off? All of this illustrates that we have amazing behavioral plasticity for walking, for talking, for moving, and this must be based on a very complex brain structure. And so if you look in your book, actually on page 269, it turns out that the body and the brain, with what figure is this? Figure 8.1. There are a number of key structures in the brain that allow for this behavioral plasticity. Plasticity is the ability to do lots of different things. There are a ton of brain structures anatomically that really allow us to do all these various behaviors motorically. So in many ways, we're kind of looking at the connection almost between mind and body. If you consider mind, this idea of these behaviors, and body, the brain, and all the different areas that are responsible for movement. So if you move along in your book, I believe the key page with some of these brain structures is, where is this? Page 281, they talk about the frontal lobe. The frontal lobe is one of the key areas. There's an area way in the back of the frontal lobe called the motor cortex, and some areas nearby that really allow a lot of high processing in the brain. So it's the motor cortex of the frontal lobe that allows for this. The cerebellum, way in the hindbrain. The cerebellum is the biggest single structure in the brain, and there are lots and lots of neurons back in the cerebellum. And then the other key structure, kind of in the midbrain, is a structure called the substantia nigra. And that is also a structure that is very well fine-tuned for motoric function. So there are a lot of different structures neuroanatomically that allow for this. And actually, the other thing I wanted to go into here, you notice in the outline, it talks about the cerebellum. And so under the picture of me on the front page of the outline, there's an abstract there. And the abstract basically talks about this idea that if you're a great speed skater, or you're really good at other sorts of motoric tasks, your brain must be very well developed. So what I'd like you to do with that abstract is just kind of in your own words, well, read through it first, and then in your own words, talk about what it's basically saying in this idea that if you're a great speed skater, your cerebellum is probably very well developed to allow all this behavioral plasticity. So that is the idea behind that one, the substantia nigra, motoric cortex of the frontal lobes. Oh, on the next page, I wanted to illustrate this point of dendritic arborization. It's kind of a weird term. Let's say we're talking about a little baby that really doesn't do any motoric function yet. If we looked at that baby's little neurons, it might look like the neuron in either A or B on that particular page. A very simple and basic neuron. But as we become more advanced motorically, look at the ones there in C, D, E, and F. The idea is, as we become better at doing these different behaviors motorically, it is probably the case that our brain really develops more and more dendrites. And this is called, that almost looks like a tree in E and F, dendritic arborization. So that is the idea behind dendritic arborization and the brain. So let's see if we can keep going here. Let's go on for the idea here of some disease states. Disease states actually also allow us to kind of get a better look at what's going on inside the brain that allows motoric behavior to happen. The first disease I want to talk about is myasthenia gravis, and I think your book once again has some information about this disease. Let's see, it looks like on page 273. What I'd like you to do is read up about this disease where you have droopy eyelids and other problems with the face and get some details about myasthenia gravis. This particular disease is very interesting in a way neuroanatomically because the basis for this disease is not actually in the brain. As it turns out, when the brain sends its signals, from the frontal lobe, the motor cortex, the substantia nigra, the cerebellum, and then when your arms or hands are about to move, right before the neurons come out, there's a very key structure there. And the key structure, and hopefully I made a picture of it somewhere, it's in your notes here, the key structure is called the neuromuscular junction. Before the neurons come out, because of course the neurons are in the brain, but before your muscle moves, there's actually a synapse right at your muscle levels where the neurons are actually coming and you're having action potentials and there are synapses. And at the very last one, there's a gap really between a neuron and the muscle. And it seems when people get myasthenia gravis, this neuromuscular junction gets negatively impacted. It turns out that the neurotransmitter at the neuromuscular junction is acetylcholine. And so it seems that for people that have myasthenia gravis, the acetylcholine is not working quite properly. And actually there's some other structural changes to that junction as well. And so acetylcholine is supposed to be released from the synaptic area. It's supposed to bind on the muscle and make your muscles basically move. The problem is that in myasthenia gravis, that is not working properly. So one of the main psychopharmacological units that they do is they give people a drug that basically blocks the enzyme that destroys acetylcholine. In your book on page 273, the name of the drug is called physostigmine. And physostigmine basically blocks acetylcholinesterase. And acetylcholinesterase normally breaks down acetylcholine. So if you're given physostigmine, that acetylcholinesterase will not work the right way, and then you'll get more acetylcholine, and that kind of helps with some of the symptoms of myasthenia gravis. So physostigmine basically blocks something that usually destroys a neurotransmitter, so physostigmine is considered an acetylcholine agonist. And if you've ever, by the way, watched the Indiana Jones movies, when they have the bows and the arrows, the South American Indians, on the tip of those arrows is actually a drug that blocks the neuromuscular junction, so it causes paralysis. So hopefully this makes good sense for you. Try to type in your own words what I'm saying here acoustically. Add a few fun facts about some of the things I've said here. The speed skaters and the points from that. What else have I asked you to do? Some 3 pieces of information about myasthenia gravis in your own words, and that'll conclude the first acoustic presentation here on motoric function. The other one's going to go into Parkinson's disease. Thank you. Bye-bye.